Learning Community ELC webinar number 4 on model lessons. We've mentioned this a couple of times, but if you're just joining us and you have a technical issue, there's a phone number on the bottom left side of your screen. You might want to write it down just in case you have any issues with your microphone or with your volume or your computer, either seeing the screen or hearing us today, and we'll try to resolve the issue. Fleck, and I work with Meter Consulting. You won't see my name on the screen anywhere because it shows up as Hans Meter, and it's Meter Consulting that both Jennifer and I work with. We're glad to have you with us. We're going to allow all of our participants, we're going to unmute your microphone here in just a minute so that you can say hello and tell us where you're at with school. I know some of you have done this before. It's just nice to get a real quick audio check that way. Just a couple of quick notes. We are recording the session, so we will have a copy of it if you need to go back and see anything later on. If you have someone with you, they don't show up on our screen, so if you wouldn't mind, enter the names of those who are with you, joining you on the call or the webinar, in the room or close by, and just put those in the questions box. Jim Cristillo says, "Go Steelers." There you go. I figured there's a few Steelers fans there. So thanks to Leanne. She's adding that Matt Hauser is with her. If you, again, have anybody else with you today, please list their names in the questions box, and we'll be glad to acknowledge that they're here today. We have a couple of presenters, and we'll get to them in just a moment. First, an audio check, just some information, and we'll do the actual audio check in just a moment. If you want to join us by your phone, that's usually the safest and most consistent route. I stopped using my microphone because it's cut in and out. So just log on via your computer, and if you need help, we'll show you the control screen on the right-hand side, or call Jennifer, and she'll be glad to help you out. Or again, you can use your computer. If you're using your computer microphone, just make sure you talk close to it. Sometimes it's a little hard to hear. And then if we unmute your mic, sometimes we get a little feedback if your volume is up too high. So just when you're talking, you might want to make sure that the volume isn't real high. We'll let you know if it is. Just again, if you want to participate in webinars, and we do encourage your participation, it's better to have a conversation than just me or the presenters talking nonstop. So you know how to use the orange button. It allows your help screen to appear or disappear on the right-hand side. Audio controls, we've talked about that. If you use your microphone, it will show up there on the right-hand side of your screen, and you can test your audio if you'd like to. Or if you'd prefer to use your telephone, when you click on the telephone button, it will give you a phone number, as you see there on the screen, an access code, and also a PIN number. If you lose your PIN number, just let us know, and we'll get another PIN number for you. There it is right there. And again, if you have questions, we encourage you to ask questions through the questions box throughout the conversation, because it's great to bring up questions as we go, especially if you don't want to interrupt someone. You can also use the little raise your hand button there. We love that because we can unmute your microphone and actually hear you ask the questions and make some comments. This group has been great about making comments and making conversation, and that's really what it's all about, even though some of us are located quite a few miles away from each other. So join us either by the question box or by raising your hand. Remember that we are recording this, and we'll have that for you later on. Also remember that Act 48 eligibility is available for you. All you have to do is fill in the PLC response form within about 5 days. So if you can get it to us by next week, that would be great. We double check to make sure that you're in attendance and participating, and that helps you earn professional learning, or what we call professional growth points or credits for licensure renewal. If you want to see the response form, we've shown this to you before. It's pretty simple. You put your general information at the top, write a paragraph of what you take away from the webinar, a couple of other paragraphs there, and it's a pretty quick thing to do. We've gotten a couple with just a sentence, and that's not really enough. So if you would, give us just a little bit more, as you probably say to your students all the time. And as you see on the left-hand side, complete and email it to our web address or our email address, PAPLC, that's Pennsylvania PAPLC, at meterconsulting.com. We'd like to have them by next week so that we can give you full credit. So there's that's the housekeeping issues. I think I've gotten all of those. You know how to use your control board on the right-hand side. So for today, we asked you to, just a couple weeks ago, to give us a quick idea of what you would like to see in a PLC for the February. So we'll quickly go over your survey responses. I think you'll find them interesting. Sharon Kinney is with us this afternoon to give us just a brief update on Common Core and how CTE teachers are integrating Common Core into the classroom. And Tim Carroll is also with us. Tim's going to be talking about classroom behavior. Tim is a teacher that is with Dauphin County Technical School. And also we have with us today Tracy Stetler, who is a literacy specialist. So she's going to be talking about some literacy strategies for CTE teachers. And again, all of them are enhanced by the conversation and the questions that you bring to the table. So we'd like you to join in this discussion as well. So if you have any questions, let me know in the questions box or raise your hand. Let's real quickly go over some of the survey responses. Again, we sent this about 2 weeks ago. We had several of you respond, and we appreciate that. Here's just a quick summary. We asked you on several topics what you would be most interested in hearing about. The lightest blue, or whatever that color is, purple, indicates the very interested topics. So you can see right in the middle, most of you responded you would like to see more on the NOCTI assessment. So we've taken that to heart, and we're working on putting that into a future PLC webinar to give you an overview. So if you have some specific questions on the NOCTI assessments or what you'd like to hear, we'd love to hear from you. The other top responses for what you said you would be very interested in hearing about: materials and resources for classrooms, the programs of study, the POS task lists, and some discussions about student engagement. So that's also going to be added to future PLCs. And then the next highest response was on Common Core, and that's why Sharon is with us this morning, and we're going to get an update on the Common Core in CTE in just a moment. So thanks for all your responses. We got several responses and several other top topics, but those were the highest rated topics. Some of the comments, one participant said she would like to see more rigor and relevance talked about and how you integrate those into lessons. We had a real good comment. It was a carpentry teacher that said, I'd like to find more creative ways of sharing what carpentry instructors do, and maybe focusing a webinar on just one topic and then sharing resources on that topic. Let us know if that would be helpful to you. Other comments, math. We'll have a math PLC webinar. That'll be coming up next month. We'll give you that time and date, just a few minutes. And then some questions about literacy strategies and other student achievement strategies. And Tracy Stetler will be with us a little later on to talk about literacy strategy. So get your questions ready, and we'll jump in. So that's about all the talking I'm going to do, which I'm sure you're glad about. I'd like to introduce Sharon Kinney. Sharon is with the Lehigh Career and Technical Institute. I always say that wrong. And Sharon is going to talk to us this afternoon a little bit about Common Core. As Sharon talks, please, again, fill out any questions that you might have in the questions box or raise your hand, because Sharon loves to hear from you as well. Sharon, I'll turn it over to you.
Good afternoon, Matt. Hi, how are you?
Very good. Thanks for joining us.
My pleasure. Are you going to turn the screen over to me, or are you going to drive?
I am going to let you drive if I can, and you should have a button on your screen that says you can take it away.
All right.
Click on that button, and we'll see your screen.
Do you see it now?
I do. I hope everyone else does. It looks like everyone else does, so go right ahead.
Okay, good afternoon. I am Sharon Kinney. I am currently an instructional coach at Lehigh Career and Technical Institute. Before I came to LCTI, I worked for the Regional Intermediate Unit number 21, which gave me great opportunities to work with PDE, the Pennsylvania Department of Institute. And I was asked today just to share a few minutes about some updates and some points about the Common Core and its alignment to what we're doing. As people move forward to align what they're doing, their task list, their curriculum to the Common Core, sometimes we get tangled in which Common Core standards to use. And if you look at your screen, it's really pretty much divided in half. There's the top half, which is the National Common Core Standards, and the bottom half, which is blue basically, and that's the Pennsylvania Common Core State Standards. When we work with publishers, this becomes a critical dividing point. If you look in the box, the standards are alike, but yet they're very different. If you look at the pink box, which represents the National Common Core Standards, you'll see the very first standards for geometry, A1 and A2. And if you just drop your eyes to the bottom of the screen, what you'll see are the very first two standards for geometry in the Pennsylvania Common Core State Standards. They mirror the content and the rigor of each other, but the organization and design is very different. So as you move forward, aligning what you're doing to the curriculum or to your task list, make sure that you're working from Pennsylvania standards, not from the National Common Core Standards. There's 4 points about the Common Core that we really need to talk about, the Pennsylvania Common Core. The first one is the State Board adopted the Pennsylvania Common Core Standards in July 2010. And, you know, if you just stop and think, they're only really 2.5 years old. If you're familiar with a 2.5-year-old, I have a grandson who's 2.5, and we have more questions about what he's saying and doing than we have answers. And it's a little bit like that with the Common Core implementation. But the good news is their goal, their reason for adopting them is that there are fewer standards. They're higher. That means that they're more challenging. And the standards in Pennsylvania are much more clear than they were 3-4 years ago. And the second bullet point is, as I said in the previous slide, Pennsylvania mirrors the content and the rigor, the challenge of the Common Core, but it's really organized much differently. And I know I've talked to national consultants who say, why did Pennsylvania do that? And we're honestly not quite sure. The third bullet is something that we have to keep in mind because we're always using the words Pennsylvania Common Core State Standards. However, there really only are 2 content areas right now that have Common Core standards, and that's English Language Arts. In fact, we've actually switched to calling it English department at high schools. We call them the ELA departments. So we're getting a language shift with this, and then you have the Math Common Core standards. The ELA standards bring with them a literacy thread that is really a shared responsibility. There have been 2 documents that were released just in August, actually August 6th of last summer, and one was Reading and Writing for History and Social Studies, and then we had Reading and Writing for Science, Math, and Technical Subjects. Technical subjects referring to CTE labs. This slide shows you at the top 2 screenshots for Pennsylvania's standards, Reading in Science and Technology, CTE. And with these documents, there brings 3 critical, really big shifts for what we've done at the high school and actually K through 12 in the past. The first bulleted item is building knowledge through content-rich nonfiction. Remember high school and you had to read Shakespeare and Hamlet and Chaucer, and I don't know about you, but all those words that kind of made my stomach kind of cringe a little bit because there were days I didn't know what they were talking about. Well, the shift is at the high school level, they're saying 70% of what we need to work with our students in is nonfiction. That's the textbook. That's the exciting part. ELA teachers are now anxious to get your text, your material, and work with it because it is nonfiction. And think about it. When we read after we graduate, when we talk about getting students college and career ready, how many of us read Shakespeare in our spare time? We're reading manuals, tax reports, rent agreements. So that's a major, major shift. The next one is regular practice with complex text and the academic language that goes with it. What they've done is they've literally bumped up the bar. So what used to be acceptable for 10th grade reading is now acceptable in 8th and 9th grade. And what was acceptable in 10th grade is now what used to be acceptable in 11th grade. So we're really challenging our students at a higher level. And as a former reading specialist, I think, oh my gosh, it was so hard to get them where they are. How are we going to take them further? And that's where we all have to work together. And that's why it's just not, you're not reading teachers, but we all share this responsibility for literacy. And no one can teach how to read your expert text better than you. The last bulleted item is reading, writing, and speaking grounded in evidence from the text. And for this one, I'm going to jump ahead to this slide. At LCTI, we actually created posters, and this is just really what the poster looks like. And this will directly relate to the keystones that your students will have to take. On the keystones, many of the questions will have an A and a B. And if you look, the text here that we gave them as an example was why you need a high school diploma. Well, we all pretty much know what the answer is, and there's a whole array of answers. But on our keystones, they're going to say, what's the answer to the question, but they're also going to ask our students, how do you know that? And they're going to ask and expect our students to go back into the text and tell what line, what was the wording that helped you come up with that answer. So when you ask a student in your classroom, how did you figure that angle, we're asking them to go back and provide evidence, and this is critical. So now I'm going to go to the previous slide, dealing with the vocabulary and the challenging text that our students are now being asked to perform and demonstrate comprehension on. And I think you're very lucky. Tracy will share with you later on a fantastic assortment. I mean, I just learned so much from her this morning of how you can accomplish this. But what you're seeing is just one slide from a mini lesson, and honestly, this lesson took no more than 10 minutes. It's a slide from an HVAC lesson. He gave the group a quiz on measurement, and they bombed. And he said in the slide, we need to address this as a group. Then he had them read the third bullet. Reading a ruler is a pinnacle part of plumbing and heating. And then he said to the kids, what do you think pinnacle means? And they kind of looked around like, you know, what's your problem? And they said, well, important. Now, maybe they didn't know the meaning of pinnacle, but you figured it. They gathered it from the context. This is one way to bump up the vocabulary. And of course, Tracy will give you a million other ways. But this doesn't take a lot of time. It doesn't take planning. In fact, Tom Shirkness, who is a carpenter participating in this webinar, he has the sign that said he's doing a math challenge, and he can share that with you later. And his invitation to his group said, who will be the winner of the math statuette? Now, they know what a trophy is. They know what a statue is. But we're bumping up the language, being cognizant of using the higher language. So who's doing what? What you're seeing here is a screenshot of 18 standards that CTE labs are responsible for addressing. Now, does every lab address every standard? No, and I'll share that with you later. I think Matt has a handout of this so that if you'd like to take it, you'd like to use it. And what I'm going to do, Matt, if it's okay, I'm just going to go in here and look at this. These are the Pennsylvania reading, and down here is writing standards for CTE labs. The first one, A, the standard is cite specific textual evidence to support analysis. So what you're saying basically is asking your students to go back, show me where you came up with that answer. Going back to the slide, what we've done here, with the 18, there's 10 standards for reading in Pennsylvania in this section, in this document, and there's 8 for writing. We asked each lab to read and discuss each of the reading and the writing standards. And then we asked them to go back and identify those that are addressed within their CTE tasks. Then we gave them a grid and asked them to place an X in a block indicating. So what did that look like? It sounded very complicated. It really wasn't that easy. Each person, each carpenter in the lab separated, and if you look, their task numbers go down the second column. Then if you look over to the right, each of these represents a reading or a writing standard. And here again, this is a standard document from Pennsylvania, so it is a law. It's something we have to address. Do we have to address every single one? That's impossible. That's why they're in high school taking other classes. They'll be picked up there. But we share this literacy responsibility. So as a department, they came back, and wherever you see a check, these are the literacy standards that are being addressed in the carpentry lab. Here you'll see the auto technology lab. This is what their document looked like. And all labs are different. All labs, as you know, I mean, it doesn't take a brain surgeon even I could figure it out, that they're all very different. Lastly is cosmetology. You'll see that we all share the literacy, but we share it in different ways. And in conclusion, just to kind of wrap up this big bundle, and remember, we're dealing with a 2.5-year-old. I just left a meeting, and we all looked and we said, what does this mean? So we're working it out. Standards don't tell you how to teach, but they tell you what the kids have to know and be able to do. It's just basically a roadmap. So with that, I hope you picked up something new. And Matt, the screen is back to you.
Okay, great. So we would like to hear questions from teachers about Common Core. Maybe everyone fully understands it, or maybe you're just at the beginning level. Actually, let's do this. We have a little poll, and it's a little different for us. So I'm going to launch this poll, and hopefully you'll see on your screen a poll, and we would like for you to put in, and this is anonymous, so we won't know who answers what, but rate yourself on your level of understanding of the Common Core. And just do this. We'll give you about 30 more seconds to do that, and then we'll just show the results from everyone that's participating. Again, this is anonymous, so we won't know if you're not doing it yet or if you're doing it fully. That's not a judgment. It's just kind of to see where we're at. And then if you have some specific questions, you can either enter those in the box on the right-hand side, the question box, or raise your hand. Use your little hand icon. Raise your hand and we'll unmute your mic. So we're going to close the poll. Everybody voted. We have 1 or 2 more who haven't. 5 more seconds, and then we'll show you what the results are. So I think we've got the results. I'm going to share the results, and then Sharon, you want to comment on the results here, what you see? Is this unusual or what you kind of expect?
Actually, you know what, Matt? I'm not seeing the results.
Okay.
I just see my screen, my PowerPoint.
Okay, so I think I need to change the presenter back to me. So let's do that. Maybe you can all see that now. Let's see.
This is Jennifer. I can see it. I think maybe that you're Sharon. You're not looking at the GoToMeeting site.
No, wait. I'm seeing the quick poll.
Okay, that's what we're looking at then. Yep.
Can everyone see the polls? Okay. Go ahead, Sharon.
That is very, very, very typical.
Okay. All right. So teachers shouldn't feel bad if they're not at a fully understanding level at this point.
No, they really, really shouldn't. This is a work in progress. And with the state and the situation with budgets, there hasn't been a lot of funding support to support teachers in the implementation of the Common Core. So we're pretty much, I think actually, this is great. considering, you know, what we have to work with.
Yes. So Sharon, Tim asks, would you be willing to share the Common Core task list for carpentry or other career areas?
Absolutely.
And how would be the best way for them to get that?
Well, first I'd like to get, I said absolutely so quickly because I think we learn by sharing, but I just want to run it by my administration and get approval. And I just want to underscore that we're just getting to know the Common Core. We're not experts at this. I don't know really, having worked with 14 school districts in this region, who is. It's a 2.5-year-old, so we may change our checks next year, next October, but we'd be happy to share what we have.
Okay, great. I want to make sure that everyone, can you all see the screen? And I may not have changed it correctly. Sorry about that. I'm still figuring this out as I go. There we go.
I know I have the authority to say I can share the poster that we developed for text evidence. I can share the documents that we have on the Common Core, just the, well, I've given them to you. You can distribute them freely to anybody you want. And I'll check to see about the labs if if our administrators feel okay with handing them over, and then I can I'll scan them and send them to you.
Fantastic. Sharon, that will be great. And then to everybody who is on the call or on the webinar, we will send that out as part of our follow-up after the webinar.
Great.
That's great. Sharon, thank you very much. I don't see any questions or hand raised, so either everyone is kind of knowing where they're at, or we're just so blown over by what you said, we have to process. Maybe both.
Either way, I hope you have a good afternoon.
Yeah.
We did
Thank
have.
you very much, Sharon.
Oh, I'm sorry. This is Jennifer. Sorry to interrupt you. We did have a comment come in from Phil Rodson. He doesn't have audio capability today, and he's saying at his site they're using a paper copy of the task grid dated April 2009, and it seems to be working well for them at this time.
Fantastic. Thank you for sharing that. That's great. Well, we want to switch gears just a little bit and go to Tracy Statler. Tracy's at Reading Muhlenberg, CTC, and you all asked for some information on literacy strategies, and I think there's a real good link between what we just discussed with Common Core and literacy strategies. Tracy, are you on the call with us?
I'm here, yes.
Fantastic. That's great. And if you have a PowerPoint, Tracy, I will give you control of that. Would you like that? To do that?
Yes.
Your PowerPoint? Okay.
Yes, please.
Yeah, I'm learning as I go. Technology. It looks like we've got your PowerPoint now in front of us. Thanks, Tracy. I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you. Well, my name is Tracy Stetler. I'm the Literacy Integration Specialist at Reading Muhlenberg Career and Technology Center. And I just put together a few slides here to give you an idea of what my role is at Reading Muhlenberg. We have a full-time literacy and numeracy coaches. And part of my responsibility is at the beginning of the school year I give all the students a reading assessment and a learning style assessment, and all that information is shared with the instructors in the students' area. And, you know, so they have an idea of where these students are at on their way in. And then we also test on the way out as seniors. I will give them the reading assessment again to gauge improvement. The reading assessment is Gates-McGinnity. If anybody wants that information, I can email it to them. And the learning style assessment is through Penn State. It's just an online learning style assessment where you get the results in seconds, and the students, there's always some discussion about it with the students. You know, they understand more fully how they learn, the best way of learning for them. So it gives a good, you know, discussion afterwards. Some things that I do with professional development is max teaching. We were all trained in max teaching here at the school a few years ago. I will also conduct some after-school kind of refreshers for teachers who kind of feel like maybe they're stuck in a rut using the same strategies over and over again, maybe introducing some new twists on some of the older teaching strategies that we covered before. So I do that. We also do that during in-service trainings. The numeracy coach and I both run some training during in-services. We just did one on anticipation guides and using ONET as a resource. We collaborate a lot between the instructors and ourselves, and we really try to customize what we're doing to fit what's going on in their program area. You know, we don't just randomly put out things for teachers to use and say, here you go, go use it. I take a more customized approach, meeting with the teachers, really discussing what they need, what they want, how they want to approach it. And I'll share some of that with some other slides. We also have a shared file. Our computer has a file where you can access all the templates for the math teaching strategies, for reading program things that I'll cover. Anything that we, as integration specialists, share with other teachers, we share with the whole school so that everyone has access to what we're doing. We also have incorporated the Skills for a Lifetime, which is 6 skills that we incorporate into our classrooms that are meant for improvement for students and their future success. And if anybody has any questions about that, I can share that information as well. That was something we've been working on for the last 2 years. All the teachers have TV screens in their rooms. Every day the word of the day is put up on the screen, and the students in the classrooms use these as part of a journaling activity. Sometimes it's sometimes the teachers use it as a journaling activity. Some of them use it as a program area word of the day. Some use both. So the words that we have on the screen here are SAT words, so the students are exposed to those words. And then, like I said, program area words of the day are also used in the program specified for what they're covering. We have a reading program where students read books, magazines, newspaper articles, whatever, and they can be even the books that they are assigned to read for some of their homeschool, classes. But if they turn in paragraph summaries or 5-paragraph essays, they earn points that are used for prizes. And we draw names at the end of every quarter, and the prizes are movie passes, lunch in the restaurant, gift cards. The teachers also win gift cards for participation with their students. And we fund that with the milk and tea vending machine that we have in the cafeteria. So that's how we fund getting those passes and the lunch and things like that. And I also really made a push to a lot of the program areas to have their own kind of reading library that's related to their program area. You know, once again, I try to gear everything towards their program area, making it relevant for what they are covering and doing and are exposed to every day in their classrooms. So, you know, there are some articles that I'll share with teachers that I'll share with everyone. You know, an example would be one on foul language that we covered last week in one of the classrooms. You know, that's a professionalism skill that maybe could be utilized for every classroom if they choose to do that. But for the most part, when I share articles from magazines or newspapers or whatever with program areas, they're very program specific. And if the teacher doesn't want to use them at that time, they can save them for when it is a relevant topic that's being covered in their area. You know, this morning I used the example of our automotive technology instructor. He uses articles, he banks them all in a folder, and when it's time and he's covering something that's relevant to one of the articles, he pulls it out and uses it. It's not just, you know, a kind of a random article thrown at the students just to get them to read. So we try to make things very relevant.
Tracy, can I interrupt you just a moment?
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry. So let me throw this question out to those teachers who are with us. Could you tell us, anyone want to share a reading strategy that you employ, just to kind of put an emphasis on what Tracy is saying. It would be good, I think, to hear from other carpentry teachers, if you're a carpentry teacher, what others are doing. So either raise your hand or you can enter it in the question box. But I think it would be interesting to know if you use some of the same techniques that Tracy's describing, or if you use something different, perhaps something that has worked successfully in your classroom that you have found and don't mind sharing with other people about what you've done and what has worked. You have some, I assume, some specific examples for carpentry coming up, Tracy, is that right?
I might have some from carpentry. I'm not sure if there's carpentry specific. I know cabinet making, there's one which could be, across the board. But most of the things I'm going to share can be used in any program area. That was kind of why I chose these. Articles, like I said, they're specific, but I also can and do create, supplemental material that goes with the article, kind of, maybe an anticipation guide or some sort of outline the students can follow while they're reading, and, that kind of thing, so that it's, relevant to what they're covering and relevant to what they're reading.
So Phil Rodson has said that he uses some select project plans that incorporate visual aids with a step-by-step text. He says that he finds that when the student runs across a problem during the assembly, he can say, did you read the instructions? And when they realize they did not and find their error in the assembly procedure, it's easy to stress the importance of reading the instructions, not just looking at the pictures. So it's sort of reading on the fly. Jim Cristillo says, I use current magazines and I have them do specific article writing about different topics.
Mm-hmm.
And then Phil Kinsel says that he uses KWL charts for the chapters in the carpentry text. He says it makes the students think about what they already know or think they know about the subject, and also makes them think of what they want or need to learn about more. So that sounds like it's fairly common from what your experiences are, Tracy?
Absolutely, yes.
And Gary Fenton says he does much of the same thing. He says, I put future words up on the classroom walls a few weeks before they're going to cover them in class. And I've known several teachers who do that and seem to find that very successful as well.
Yes. Another way you can do that is even, having the students go through the chapter that they're just starting that day and go through and pick out words that they think are going to be important in that chapter. We kind of put them all on we could write them on a smartboard or however we want to save all those words, and then refer back to them at the end of the chapter and say, okay, how important were these words to this chapter? And we, can really, it kind of packages everything up at the end there and really makes them understand that, yeah, these words are important, and I did need to know them.
Yeah, exactly. Paul Coble says, I make students outline the current chapter with summaries on the key points, which is another useful technique as well. Tom is with us, I'm sorry, Tim is with us. Tim, did you want to make a comment about that? I've unmuted your mic.
Actually, I'm going to make a comment. This is Sharon Dialing.
Okay.
Tim and I were talking. One of the things we have done school-wide is work on the idea of annotating text, and which would involve highlighting and making notes about the text as you read it, so to help you get through. The idea the students are looking for things that they find important to them. And I know that Tim has recently started to have his students do articles that relate to construction, specifically relate to whatever they are working on in construction. He just said to me, I have an article about dormers, and we're working on dormers. So, it's not like it's taking it out of the curriculum in any way, but taking a look at an article, and as the students read, they must find the things that they find important, highlight, and make notes on it, so that they have discussion points afterwards.
Tracy, you want to comment on that? Is that a good
No,
strategy?
that's really good. We do that with articles as well, with a lot of discussion involved afterwards, maybe highlighting important details and then discussing them, and who found what important and, how that relates to what they're covering.
We had one teacher earlier who said, when the students say to him, "Oh man, I came here to class because I don't want to read, I don't, I'm not good at English, and so don't make me do it here in this class." And I think some of us can empathize with that, but this teacher particularly said, "Hey man, you're reading all the time." And then he points out they're reading instructions, and they're reading manuals, and they're looking at guidebooks, and they may not call it reading. It may not be sitting down with a biography or a newspaper, but it's still reading and in comprehension, etc.
Yes.
So sometimes it's labeling it for the students, I think. So, well, good, very good comments. Continue to make comments, anyone, in the question box or chat box, or even in the by raising your hand. Tracy, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but you can certainly go right on ahead, and we'll be stopping with some more questions. I
tend to just try to keep going so that I get it all in if I can. But the next thing that I want to talk about is process writing. I don't know if anyone uses this, but we have really started to use this in many, many different ways in many different classrooms. And, the whole idea behind process writing is having the students write the steps of a process, and it just gives them another way to think about what the process is, what the steps that are involved, and, what their audience is a novice. Is it, what steps could be, potentially skipped or eliminated, and you wouldn't be able to complete the project if you missed this step. That's why it says make sure you list each step, even if you think it's easy. And we ran into this with, a couple different classrooms where they are so used to doing things so automatically, they're not thinking about really what the process is that's involved in doing this. And this was an example in horticulture, how to make a corsage, and we had the students do this independently first. Write down the steps on how to make a corsage. What are your steps? What would you do first, second, third, fourth, whatever? And then we kind of came together as a group and went up to the smartboard and wrote a set of instructions based on what students are saying. Now, of course, we got to the idea. We got number 3. There was 5 different things that we found that students thought was number 3 steps. And eventually we discuss and we get it to where this was pretty much the final list, and this took us a theory lesson to do. And as you can see in the red, there were some subcategories there, because wiring the flowers isn't just saying wire the flowers. It depends if it's a certain flower, a certain technique is used to wire the flower. So there was those things, and the students got to gain a better understanding about why things are done in a certain order, and and this can also be a good thing for NOCD review when there's a process involved in doing something with NOCD that a judge is going to be looking at, and what are the steps involved in doing this process. Do you have all your supplies in place? Where have you read the spec sheet or whatever? And that's just the kind of thing here, like talking to the customer and determining the color and things like that, because right away the students just want to gather up the material and start making. They're not thinking about what the kind of precursor is to some of these things. Another way we did it was, sorry?
Could I ask you just a quick question that may be on the minds of some teachers? Some students take great pride in not writing steps down, thinking that they're appearing more intelligent, perhaps, or a little more cool if they don't write things down. I mean, what do you say when they say, "I don't need to write this down"? What's the purpose of writing down all the steps?
Well, I think it becomes a deeper level of thinking, I think, on the student's part. And again, we're thinking of the audience, and I kind of look at the students and say, what if I was coming in here and you had to teach me how to make a letter holder or make a corsage? How would you teach me how to do that? And I just think it gives them a deeper and better understanding of what's actually involved. And there's steps that they're not thinking of that are kind of automatic for them, but in a way maybe could, and I think by doing this, especially with the corsage and even with I'll get to the letter holder in a second, we approach that in a different way. but you gain this understanding of what you're doing, what the purpose is of what you're doing. So many students say, why are we doing this? I know what to do. I know how to do this. But it's that level of understanding. And sometimes this can be transferred into other things. By thinking about how you're doing this process, it can be transferred to other things that you're doing in that area.
Okay. Thanks.
Another way we did it in cabinet making was the instructor had a picture, which is the picture you're seeing here, a picture of a letter holder. And he said, I want to make this letter holder. Somebody called me and said, I like this letter holder and I'd like you to make one for me. How are we going to do this? We don't have any plans. We don't have any measurements. We don't, they told me they wanted, stained, and that's all we know at this point. And, they just want it to look like the picture. What are we going to do? And this was a little more difficult because they had never, although they had, assembled things that maybe were similar to this, they had never taken what was a photograph and wrote out the steps of how to actually build something like this without any directions at all. And, right away they want to say, get the wood. Well, you can't get the wood until you know how much wood or what kind of wood or, what color does it need to be stained, which determines that. And even the cost, what kind of wood are you going to use if the cost is a factor? And all those things that they weren't thinking about. Because this is definitely something, that could be, a custom item that's done, in the industry. And someone works up directions on how to make something like this, so we had the students do it. And one of the main things was measuring a letter and measuring the size of an envelope. And that's how they got the opening for, the letter slots there. And, then how are we going to put it together and, the steps that were all involved in this. So this one was a little more challenging for the students because it was just a picture. They know what a process is to make something out in the, cabinet making class. But, to start from, basically zero and come up with the steps on how to do this. And, I took pictures of the students as they made this once they had the process all together and the measurements were correct and there was a prototype made and, all that was involved in this process. Another way can be analyzing the technical instructions, and a good example of this is in our plumbing class, and this could happen, I would assume, in carpentry or whatever, but there was a set of instructions that came with just pictures, no text. And the students kind of were very confused by this. It was kind of like the old IKEA thing where you get this set of instructions that has no text with it. It only has pictures. So how are you going to get someone to assemble this? And they found it very, very confusing to follow just pictures. They actually wanted written instructions. So this was turned into kind of a lesson, writing the instructions that go along with these pictures. So that was another way we did this. And then I just inserted this for any questions about the process logs, or if anyone uses process logs, and if they do, how do they use them? Another strategy we use is Cornell Notes, two-column notes. I think pretty many people are familiar with using these. It's main ideas and terms on the left, and notes and supporting facts and things on the right-hand side, and then a summary at the bottom. And what some of my instructors have been doing is kind of customizing them to fit, what they're covering, and customizing them for their students. So this would be an example of in early childhood education. This is how it looks to a student who's writing their own Cornell notes. This is an example from automotive technology where he has some scaffolds in place here where on the left of vocabulary, he wants them to know, what does ASE mean? What does his parts manager, parts specialist, what do these people do? What are their role, in the automotive industry? How are these roles different? And doing that as a summary. So he has it very specific, very, very targeted to what he wants these students to know. And this is another example of how he has set up the same type of note-taking, although it looks different, you know, under basic engine. And this could be used, again, in carpentry in any, you know, program area. It just happens to be an automotive system one. And he has exactly what he wants the students to cover in these Cornell notes. Basic engine. What can you tell me about that? What can you tell me about drive lines and running gear? What can you tell me about suspension, fuel systems, starting and charging, all those things. And then he also has a follow-up at the end after these students complete these sheets, and he makes sure that they didn't miss a thing on these notes. Everything is there. Everything is, you know, what he wants those students to know. It's very systematic. So that's another example of how Cornell Notes can be used. It just doesn't have to be that 2-column thing. It can be customized to however you want to do it. And he's, the automotive instructor, is very good at doing these kinds of things with his students and just making sure they get the targeted areas covered. This is something we just...
I'm sorry, just joining you. If you use Cornell Notes or you use some version of that, just let us know. Write a little note in your question box, or let us know there, or raise your hand, and we'll get to you. But as you're finishing up, Tracy, I just want to see what others are using that are on the webinar.
Yes, yes. This is although the format on here is not very good. This is a Publisher journal, and it's done in Publisher, and it's a week-long journal that is specific for any program. It can be for any program area. It just happens to be, this one is motorcycle, marine, and small engine, and it's the Chapter 8 carburation. The second week that they're on carburation, and the book is worth 100 points. And what is inside the book is every day an assignment is given that's worth 20 points, so the week's worth of the journal is worth 100 points. Every day they do an MME word of the day. This one happens to be governors, and then they define it and write a sentence using the word. They have 2 math problems that are relative to carburetors or carburation, whatever they're covering that week or 2 weeks, and they're geared towards that topic. The paragraph of the day, a minimum of 5 sentences, and in the packet is included everything that the students need to know on writing a paragraph, how to write a good paragraph. There's all kinds of tips, and I go over all those things with those students in that class, and there's a rubric that the students can look at as they're writing their paragraph to know that they have everything they need to write a good paragraph. And then this one is explain manual throttle controls. And this is a week-long packet that we made up and we're using, and this is we're doing this as a test, kind of piloting it. 2 teachers volunteered to pilot this, and so far they absolutely love it. It's all a neat little package. Every day is relative to the topic they're covering. Every theory lesson is going to be geared towards now this topic of governors and explaining manual throttle controls and doing some of the math problems. And the students, it takes the students about 20 minutes a day to do this, and you know, it's part of their assignments for the day. And you know, it really gives the students a structured kind of environment within the classroom. It helps the instructor because they have that structure. They gear their theory lessons towards this topic every day. They know exactly what they're going to be covering every day. And you know, it seems to be working out well with those instructors that have been using it. So we will keep, you know, updated with that and keep working on that.
Tracy,
UseDictionary.com. Yes.
Just for a second, and Charles, I'm going to open up your microphone because Charles Bella says that he uses these and sometimes has students draw a small picture. Is that right, Charles?
Yes.
Yes. Can you hear me there?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, to give a non-linguistic approach, one of our ladies that helps us with integrating math and reading puts in, you know, we have the column for the vocabulary word plus the definition and then a non-linguistic so that sometimes they can remember the picture and then that jars their mind for the vocabulary for the definition.
Yes, very good. One other thing I wanted to mention too is at the end of the week or 2-week period, which however long that chapter lasts or that specific task lasts, there also is activities that wrap the whole thing up at the end, vocabulary games, those kinds of things that kind of wrap up the whole package with it too.
Yeah. Visuals are so important, I think. We have a lot of visual learners, so the combination of literacy strategies with visual strategies, I think, is a great idea.
Yes.
Thanks for sharing that. Peter Cardamone, hopefully I'm not mispronouncing your name, Peter, but he wanted to know if we could get a copy of the workbook that you've been showing.
Yes, I can give it to him. It's all been completely customized for that teacher. So, I create the template for the teacher depending on how the teacher wants it laid out and what he wants in it, the content and all that, and then, it's kind of just adding and subtracting every week with it. So, yes, the template's very large, but I can share it, yes.
Okay, great.
Mm-hmm.
This is Jennifer. Could I interrupt also with a question? Tracy, I'm wondering, for schools that don't have a literacy resource such as yourself on board, what would you recommend? Do you have any recommendations to them as to how to start or where to look for resources?
Well, I think, anybody can use me as a resource. I'm going to give my information at the end. I'd be glad to help anyone. Max Teaching, they have a website, and they have DVDs and things like that, and books for purchase. I would say attending conferences, the Integrated Learning Conference at Penn State. There's a conference coming up in the summer at Seven Springs, and I learned a lot from attending those conferences. Where I really got the bug for literacy was the Governor's Institute, which I don't think they have anymore. But they were very instrumental in getting our literacy team started here. If you're involved in the TAP program, if there's ever any SRED workshops in their area, they are extremely helpful for integrating numeracy and literacy.
Great. And Charles Novella says that you can check your local, is it IU, if someone can support? I'm not sure. Charles,
yes,
yeah, the IU, the local school there that helps out with the children. Sometimes they come down and they'll do a in-service or, a quick thing with the teachers. And that may be just if you have no one at all to support you, at least an avenue to get started.
Yeah. Great. So Tracy, we'll turn it back to you to wrap it up.
Okay. We use dictionary.com for flashcards and things like that. It's a good resource. Word walls, I think someone mentioned something about word walls or putting words up a few weeks before a chapter was started. These are in cosmetology. I know they're a little hard to see, but they're actually on the students' lockers and cabinet doors, and they're magnets. So the students have every time they go in and out of their locker, every time they go in and out of their cabinet, they can see these words. She has an extreme amount of issues with her students learning this, vocabulary for passing state boards. Like their tibial, the anterior tibial nerve, and that kind of thing. Those type of words really trip a lot of her students up. So she started doing this, and it's been helpful. These are profile boards that we started doing as well, which are students. This one happens to be from the fashion design class, but I've done them in automotive and done them in plumbing and all different classroom areas where they're given a topic. This one happened to have been a fashion designer, and they research the topic. They do an oral presentation on the topic, and they put together their own board. This can be done digitally as well. This one's not digital, but this student has his own drawings in there as well, and the whole thing on this particular designer. We've done them in other areas on different copper tubing, things like that. So it can be applied to any. Just have to kind of use your own creativity about what you want to cover with it. Somebody said something about dormers and, in bricklaying, we've used it for different types of like archways and things like that. This is another one that just talks about, it's a color wheel kind of thing. This would be a monochromatic one. And then the students become the expert on this and present their board to the class and talk about it. We use cubing. This is a max teaching strategy, and it just delves deeper into a topic. So it could be about dormers and, how would you compare a dormer or dormers? I mean, I don't know anything about dormers. I'm mentioning that because someone did say something about it. But, what does it make you think of? Why is it important to know about? Describing them, what are the characteristics of them? Question mark cards, this is also in max teaching. So this is kind of goes with Bloom's taxonomy, trying to have students think on a higher level. And you can use these in different ways in your classroom. Some teachers use them as a way to get students to even write their own test questions. Evaluate this, prioritize that, things like that. How would you write a test question on this subject using the evaluation, method or synthesis? And this is an ONET. I spoke a little bit in the beginning about some ways you can use ONET, which is the online that's tied to job titles in program areas. And this one was from Auto Technology, and just thinking about what career they're looking at and delving deeper into that and doing a literacy strategy with it. So the student wrote the tools, the technology, the abilities, the activities, even did a little chart there on the education level required and wages and the PA wages as opposed to the national wages. So they really delved deep into their program area and one of their job titles that they're interested in. And then this is my contact information. I would help anyone who needs any help with anything or has any questions about anything that I shared today. This is like the tiniest little snippet of what I do here. So I tried to pick and choose what I thought would be the most helpful, but that could cross over to different program areas. So that's about it for me.
Very helpful to us, Tracy. Thank you very much for covering that and giving us very practical examples of what you do. Jennifer asked a question earlier that I think is a good question. Are there teachers who have a specific literacy issue or maybe a difficult student who is not picking up or really struggles with English or literacy in some capacity that you want to ask Tracy before we let her go? If you do, put that in the question box or raise your hand and we'll unmute your microphone, or perhaps you have a strategy that you use that aligns with what Tracy's talked about that you found to be effective. I appreciate everyone who's already contributed some thoughts and ideas. Tim Carroll writes, he would also recommend that people work with their IUs. He says our IU got us involved with literacy strategies through a program called PLN. And Tom, I'm going to unmute your mic. Did you have a comment, Tom Sherkis?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead.
Great. Fantastic presentation, Tracy. Really informative. Excuse my voice, little tail end of a cold here. I deal mainly with first-year carpentry students, 9th to 10th grade, some 11th graders. This year I'm having a lot of difficulty getting the kids in the reading phase, particularly from our textbook. We use the RCA curriculum here. The kids have come in and pretty much from the beginning of the year have been very willing to write. They're good note takers. They're not shy about doing a lot of writing when it comes from my PowerPoints, from my DVD presentations, things that I find on the internet and put up on the whiteboard, doing weekly vocabulary words relevant to the lesson. But when I try to direct them into our textbook to seek out just single topics or to get a general theme, kind of like pre-read things to get an idea of what we're going to discuss. They are really resistant to the actual reading in textbook form. I'm wondering if is it just this year? Is it's something that we're going to see more of? I'd like your opinion on that and maybe some insight.
I haven't seen that too much with the classes, that I've gone into in here. There's definitely, it could be, I mean, I don't know, I know when I was a classroom instructor, the way the textbook was set up and the way the textbook looked made a huge difference to the way students read. I know we can't all afford to buy new textbooks all the time, but I know that when I had to buy a new textbook, I really did a lot of research on it. I brought through samples to my committee with different textbooks. I had the kids sit down with the textbooks and really look at the textbooks and tell me what they thought they liked and disliked about the book, each book. I had the book analyzed for reading level, that kind of thing. So I know you might not be at that point yet, but for future reference, that might be something. It could be just the way the book looks. The other thing I would suggest is if they do like seeing it on a PowerPoint or seeing it, on the screen, you could possibly do an outline on the screen. I don't know if you have smart boards. Sometimes we do, a scaffold where we'll show some of the, even with the Cornell notes, here's the topic, someone write down, some main ideas here that you see in the book. Someone else write down this, or even paired reading, or, reading together in a group and coming up with a summarization so that each group or each student is the expert on that particular section of the textbook. So they're not all reading pages 10 to 15. One group's reading page 10, one group's reading page 11, one group's reading page 12, and then they all kind of come together and share and become the expert on that page or that section of the textbook. And it takes the heat off of all the kids. They're only reading one book, but one part of the book, but they're getting all the information in one way or another, whether it's a presentation by the other students or an outline or something like that. Sometimes that can work. Or, I know it's more work for you or someone that you can work with by putting some of it on a PowerPoint for the students, not necessarily taking the heat off of them for reading. I mean, they still should, probably be using the textbook, but, maybe an outline format on the smartboard or the board for them to follow as they're reading. It's not so maybe daunting. I don't know. I would have to.
You have a smart board there, Tom?
No, I don't. But the PowerPoints that I do use come from the RCA book. And in between the lines, Trace, I think maybe what I need to do is to make some of the things from the PowerPoint disappear where that would be found in the book. Because naturally, the book, the PowerPoint, there's a lot of commonalities, pictures, diagrams, and maybe I can take those and edit those PowerPoints and maybe pull things out of the PowerPoint that may direct them into the book to find that answer, to make them more comfortable with the text, so to speak, the textbook.
Right. Right, and they like feeling like they're the expert on that area of the textbook. They like feeling like that. This is what I did. Me and my partner, we found this information, and we're going to present it now to the class. And students generally like that. That's one of the first things I try with students that are hesitant with reading in the book.
Tracy, thank you very much for your comments. I don't see any other hands raised right now. But I appreciate your question too, Tom. So we have your email address, and I think you'll probably get a few follow-up calls for email.
Okay, great.
Thanks for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
We're going to take just a quick poll because you might want to stay with us, Tracy. Just
oh, I will. Yeah.
Okay. Let me put out this poll real quick. I think that hopefully you're able to see the poll. And if you can answer the poll, just 3 quick questions on your techniques or your knowledge of literacy strategies and how well you integrate them. Give you about 20 seconds here to fill that out, and then we'll close the poll and just kind of see what the responses are. Again, these are anonymous, so we won't give these to your administrator or send them back to you. It just kind of is a nice way to find out where everyone is in a kind of a quick fashion. So about 2 more seconds left on this, and we'll close the poll and we'll take a look at the results. 5 more seconds, so add your comments if you would. And I think we'll close the poll right now. We'll close the poll and share the results. Tracy, what do you think of that result?
I can't see the screen. I'm still seeing my screen.
Okay. Let me see if I can. Can you see that now?
Yes. I would say, you know, I'm glad that 69% are using some sort of literacy strategy. I think that's great. You know, our school, we're required to do literacy and numeracy every day in our classrooms. So, you know, that's, you know, kind of how our school is. So you'd see probably a very high percentage of people using literacy and integrating literacy into their lessons. But yeah, that's good.
So it's really about 92%.
I'm sorry?
It's really about 92% because you take the top 2, at least some literacy strategies are being implemented.
Right.
Yeah. Good. Again, we appreciate the discussion, and if you have follow-up questions about this, either contact Tracy or let us know. And if we need to concentrate on another facet of it, I think we're going to do that. Paul Koval, Tracy said, very informative and great ideas. So again, we appreciate you sharing your thoughts and your information with us.
Thank you.
Well, I'm going to open up the microphone to Tim Carroll, and Tim is a carpenter teacher at, I believe it's Dolphin. Oh yeah, there it is, right in front of me, right on the screen. Dolphin County Technical School. And Tim, I don't know if you're still with us, but hopefully you are. And one of our questions that we had on our survey was about classroom behavior management. So let's ask Tim if he would talk a little bit about what he does in his classroom. Tim, you want to take it away?
Yeah. Can everybody hear me?
Sure can. Okay.
As far as classroom discipline goes, I have a couple things just to say. Number one, everybody has to find their own style. You have to find out what works for you. What works for me might not be what works for other people. We all have our own different personalities. I know when I first started teaching, I tried to be exactly like my mentor teacher, and became very frustrated because he was an ex-military man. He ran a very tight ship, and I found that my style is a lot more easygoing, and I found what works for me was just to be myself rather than try to be someone else. So that's the first point I'd like to make. Second point, I think a lot of student behavior problems arise when students aren't kept occupied. You give teenagers free time and they find a way to get into some trouble. If you keep your kids busy, basically you're going to solve a lot of your discipline problems. At least that's what I found in my situation. I don't know if anybody has any comments along those lines or not.
Yeah, if anybody has a comment, raise your hand or do a question, and we'll open up your microphone for you. Wait here just a second here. Paul says he completely agrees with you there, Tim.
Okay. And then I did email you my list of classroom expectations. I don't know if you can show that or not.
I do. I'm going to show them right here.
Okay, very good. Basically, I got this when I first started teaching back in the 80s and early 90s. We went through a program called Lee Cantor's Assertive Discipline, and I don't know if anybody's familiar with that, but it basically is a three-part discipline or three-part way of running your classroom. It has expectations, rewards, and consequences. And the expectations are basically my rules, and I only have 5 of them. Basically keep it short, and the kids can remember them. They're listed there. I won't bore you by reading them out. But I do the second one, follow instructions the first time. That pretty much covers almost every problem that you're going to have. You give your kids instructions, and if they're not going to follow them the first time you give them, then they've broken the rules, and then you can go on from there. But I think that's most important. Then I do believe in rewarding students. I'm a big one for that. I'm very much into positive reinforcement. I think it's far better than negative reinforcement. So I try to give as many rewards as I can, and some of these I will explain. Good grades is a natural consequence or a natural outcome of following classroom rules. I have maybe one Friday a month when all the students are doing well, I'll bring in some Little Debbie cakes and hand them out before the kids leave. There you can have them at their lunch because they're not allowed to eat them in our shops. I do buy a car for each student who gets an A in my class. It's a Hot Wheels. At the end of every marking period, we will sit down and have conferences, and any student that gets an A who's followed my rules ends up with a Hot Wheel car. It sounds funny, but you'd be surprised how many kids really want that car. I have seniors that have maybe a dozen cars, and they're very proud that they still have every single car that I've given them.
SCCLA and sophomore class counselor sponsoring a Valentine's
Sorry,
Day
it's
dance
end of the day announcements
7 to
here.
9 p.m. Cost to get in the dance will be $3, and the dress will be appropriate casual. Come join DJ Stoner and celebrate in the East Paris.
Sorry.
We're all ready for it. That's good.
Sorry, that's the end of the day announcements. You might be interrupted again. We have a ping pong party at the holiday time, at Christmas time, winter break time, whatever you want to call it, and I'll give that if the kids are doing what they need to do. And at the end of the year, I always have a Carpentry Awards banquet, which goes over pretty well. Consequences, I really don't, in all honesty, I don't use them that often. I do like push-ups. I don't have to do any paperwork on that. The kids don't have to do them, but many of my students enjoy doing them. They'd rather do the push-ups for profanity or breaking the rules rather than have me call home rather than me write them up or anything like that. There's always a points as well. Most of the kids, it's a good way to get your shop clean. The big thing I do is contact parents. I call the parents whenever there's a problem, and whenever there's something good happening too. I try to contact parents. I love to pop them an email saying that their student is doing real well, or make a phone call and tell them that as well. So, and that's what I would suggest, be in constant contact with parents.
I would like to chime in here too. Tim and I were talking before you put us on here, and one of the things that I can tell you about Tim is that when he does have to approach a student, he does so in such a way that the student doesn't lose face. They're not backed into a corner literally or figuratively. They're not backed into a corner. And I have seen teachers come up to students, the first time they see something going wrong, and they're in their face, they've got a tone, an attitude, and really the student almost has no choice in some cases but to lash out. And I also think that while all this, Tim has excellent expectations, and he does keep his kids busy. That's very apparent when you see his shop area. I think the other side is, how do you approach the kid when you do have to correct something? There's a number of ways you can do so, but if you always go at a kid in a very negative attitude-like tone, that's what you're going to get back. And sometimes I wonder why kids get in trouble for lashing back out when the teachers put them in that situation.
Good point. So comments or questions from anyone about your behavior management in your classroom? I know we're getting close to the end of the day here, obviously. This is great information, Tim. Comments or questions? You can add them. I can just add one comment. We had a carpentry teacher at my school that I worked at, and one of his techniques, he was new, and he took him about a year to figure it out, but he used Zig Ziglar motivational tapes, and what he would do is it was punishment. So if they had 10 minutes with Zig Ziglar if they were on the first offense, and then 20 or 30 minutes, I think, after the second and third offenses. And he actually ended up having really great results from that. Students actually liked the tape, so we had to figure out a way to have them not get in trouble so they could listen to Zig Ziglar. We have a comment from Paul who says, students become embarrassed when confronted in front of their friends and will always talk back. It's always better to take them aside or talk in private. And I think those of you who have been around a while know that's obviously very true. Other comments or questions? I'm going to, Tim, just to add to supplement this, I'm going to add one more poll. This will be our last poll, and this is an easy one. So I'll give you 30 seconds to put your response into this poll. If behavior issues are really not a problem in your classroom, or you're able to manage them, or if you still need some additional strategies. I think it does vary. Sometimes it varies year to year or class to class, doesn't it?
This is Jennifer. I was curious. Oh, I'm sorry. While folks are answering that poll, I was curious to ask Tim those consequences and expectations that you shared. Is that something that you have posted up in your shop, or do you hand that out to students at the beginning of the year?
I do hand it out as part of their syllabus. The expectations, basically the 5 rules, are posted in my shop.
And do you have them sign it like a contract, or have you ever considered maybe doing that?
I don't know. I don't. It's something that I could do, but I don't have them sign anything.
Okay.
So Tim, here are the results, and looks like most people, about 80%, don't really have too much of a problem with it, but there's a few that still need some strategies. So hopefully some of the strategies you mentioned today are helpful. If you have a specific concern about a specific incident or situation, 1 or 2 students, this would be a good time to address it right now. And then we're going to close because we just have a couple of more minutes left, about 8 more minutes left of the webinar. I don't see any questions coming in right away, but go ahead and feel free to add them into the questions box, and we'll forward those on to Tim if we have some more time remaining. Tim, again, thanks for sharing your ideas. It's just great to know what another teacher is doing.
You're welcome.
Very helpful. Well, let me come back real quick to our PowerPoint here and finish up, and we can wrap up a few pieces of information. Again, you can still ask us questions here if you do have some questions. Some of our next steps, just want to let you know about the next dates for our next Carpentry TLC. Will be on March 12th. It'll be a morning session from 9:30 to 11. And several of you asked about math strategies, so we will be covering math strategies at that time, and Jennifer will be doing that. Also, our next one after the March meeting is April 23rd from 1:30 to 3, and we'll be doing our wrap-up at that time. And then all PLC groups are expected to participate sometime this summer. It looks like the meeting is set. TACDEC meeting is June 26th through the 28th, if you don't have those on your calendar. Just a couple of pieces, and then I'm going to turn it over to Jennifer to talk about the SAS account. If you do or haven't yet created an SAS account and haven't joined the PLC community, you can do that at pdesas.org. And Jennifer, I'll give it to you to explain a little further.
Okay, thanks, Matt. And I'm going to grab presentation away from you so I can show everyone my screen. Let's see.
Want me to change the screen?
There we go. Okay. Okay. Sounds good. Does everyone see it? Do you see the SAS portal there?
There it is.
Okay, great. So just wanted to give everyone a refresher on the SAS community page that we have set up for our PLC group and give you an overview of some of the resources that are available there, especially as we're talking about math integration and literacy and so forth. So this is the home page for the SAS web portal, and I've already logged into my account. So what I will do is go up to the upper right-hand corner where it says Teacher Tools, and click on that. And then from here I'll select My Communities. And you'll see that I have quite a few listed here from the various PLC groups. If you haven't joined the Carpentry PLC community, you can find it by doing a keyword search in this top box here. If you just type in something like BCTE PLC and do a search on that, it will bring up some various groups, and from there you can select the Carpentry group. You can also participate in the other groups if you're interested. They're open to anyone who can benefit from them. And then that takes you to the homepage for our group. And what I'll do is just scroll down to the bottom where we have the resources posted. And what we've done here is create headers for things such as basic information as well as specific resources affiliated with the program of study sections as well as literacy and math integration. And as we receive resources from you and from our guest speakers, we do post them to this website. So please make use of this, and if you have materials that you would like to share, you can forward those to our PAPLC at Meter Consulting address, and we'll get them posted up here so that what we'd like to do is to build this out and have this become a resource that you can go to for ideas and examples. So just to click on literacy integration, I don't think there's too much in there currently. We do have a list of some resources that's posted there from one of our presenters from last year's PLC. We will get a copy of Tracy's information from today and post it up there. But again, if you have materials or resources that you use that you'd like to share, please get that to us so we can get it posted and make it available to everyone. Similarly with the skill content areas, please go ahead and forward that information to us. And Matt, I'll turn it back to you.
Okay, thanks, Jennifer, very much. Just one final comment. Peter Cardamone says administration is huge in student discipline. So true. It's always a plus if the teacher and the administration are on the same page. Unfortunately, this does not always happen. And I can imagine there's a few heads agreeing with Peter's comment. Thank you all very much for participating today, for offering your comments both in written form and for letting us unmute your microphone and join the webinar that way. And if you have any questions, just use that email address about any topic or about any of the information, and we'll be glad to get it to you. We will talk to you again in March. So again, thank you for joining us today. Have a great afternoon.